I am Steve Livingston. I work for Lloyd's Banking Group, where I'm involved in the running of their security operations department. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is explain a little bit about who we are, introduce the teams that are part of our security operations function, talk a little bit about tools and our current detection capability, and what's coming next. Now, as far as questions are concerned, you can keep them to the end if you want, but if there is anything that is pressing while I'm talking, if you can attract my attention, I'm happy to answer at the time. Okay, so who are we? Well, security operations is part of a wider department within Lloyd's Banking Group, IT cyber security. And we've now incorporated a lot of our risk functions under that banner as well. So you'll see over on your left that we've got head of IT risk, and we've got 6 people in there whose sole function is to evaluate the risk that we are exposed to as an organization for different business units. We then we have the head of application security, who's looking specifically at that those platforms. We've got platform management, and that's basically managing all the security hardware that we actually employ as a bank. So things like hardware security modules, firewalls, WAFs, all those kind of sexy things are all managed by that guy. We look at vulnerability, so like everyone else, we're constantly scanning our infrastructure, looking for weaknesses in it, and there's one person who's solely responsible for remediating that. This is quite a big job in most financial services companies, because most companies that exist now, certainly at the Lloyd's banking level, have grown through acquisition. So their estate is quite polymorphous, and they're not necessarily aware of how they've been managed in the past or what their current security status is. What have we got? We've got head of engineering, platform direction and governance. This is a kind of strategy role. So this person is actually directing where we're going to go to next. And there's a head of the cybersecurity program. We're investing quite heavily in developing our capability in that front, to such an extent that we now have to employ someone purely to manage those programs. And we've now got 3 legs under that program, which is cybersecurity. We're looking at risk remediation front, and if I can remember the third one, we are also looking at currency on all of the platforms as well. Head of network security, so we have someone who's purely employed just to make sure that our networks are secure, and I'll come to that in a bit more detail later, because they do have an interface with what we do in security operations also. And head of platform security, so this is looking at security around Windows, Unix, and all the other platforms, and making sure that we are up to speed on those fronts as well. But the interesting one is the head of cybersecurity operations, and I report into this leg. And what we look like under there is, over on the left-hand side, you can see some CSOC is a managed service. This is our cybersecurity operations center. Now, a little bit of history here. I've been involved in this kind of work now for about the past 6-7 years. So 6-7 years ago, the security operations function within Lloyd's was actually 6 people based out of London, and they were primarily a compliance shop. So they were looking mainly at things like the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and making sure that we actually complied with that. That has grown substantially in the last 6 years. We're now in excess of 130 people based in Edinburgh working on security operations. And that's across all of the teams there. The CSOC itself is now in excess of 70 people. And they operate 24/7, and they're constantly monitoring traffic coming into Lloyd's for any malware. We also do hunting. So we're looking for people that are up to naughty things, i.e. the insider threat. And we do find, unfortunately, quite a lot of that in a large organization like ourselves. But anyway, as well as the 24/7 service, we also have a technical support team. So within the CSOC, they use certain SIEM tools to monitor the activity. So that would be QRadar and Splunk. And I know one of the exhibitors outside is doing quite a lot in Splunk, and I like these particular little flashes where you Splunk because ninjas are too busy. I just had to have that one because I think some of the people that we are actually employing through ECS, who are the service provider in the CSOC, sometimes I think they still think they're ninjas, but anyway. So the operational technical support area is looking at the development and deployment of new rules out into the CSOC. So as we see emerging threats coming in, we will develop a use case and develop rules under that use case to actually detect any nefarious activity. The next team is the development technical support. Now this is like a grade up. What's in there is senior engineers. And what they are doing is they are doing more kind of R&D, intelligence type work and working out what those threats are. And they also get heavily involved in any serious incidents that we actually encounter. This next one, Senior Manager, Strategy, Governance, Insurance, which is now, I've forgotten to update the slide, Strategy, Transformation, Integration, and Governance. That's where I actually work, and I'm actually responsible for defining what the strategy is for the CSOC, and then making sure that the cyber program, which I mentioned in the previous slide, actually develops that functionality for me so that I can exploit it with the other teams. And for my sins, I've got a reputation of being a good incident manager, so I also manage the security incident team. So this team is quite a small team, really. It's about 4 people at the moment. We are growing it, but it's difficult to get people with the right combination of skills to actually work in that area. So it's taken us a little while to grow that. But we do encounter some major incidents over time. DDoS is a particular threat for us, and we have been threatened recently by the Lizard Group and have responded to that proactively. But we haven't been actually attacked by them, but it was an interesting weekend when that threat came out. And the last team there is data loss prevention. Now, like all large organizations, we process a lot of data, and we find that some of it actually gets out into the wild on a fairly regular basis, and obviously we don't want that. So we've set up a team that seems quite large now. It's 17 people whose sole purpose is actually to look at the output from a semantic tool set to actually work out when things are going out of our company, either via the email channel or the internet channel. So that's who we are. This is our Security Operations Centre here in Edinburgh. As I said, there's in excess of 70 people employed in that. So if you are in the space of developing that, one of the things I would say to you is however much floor space you think you're going to need for your CSOC, then you probably be it's well to double that. So estimate how much you're going to need, because the growth and personnel that you need to operate these things is exponential. And this is just a view of the inside of the main console, which they use to monitor what is actually going on at any one time. You'll see a little graph down in the bottom there with the green chart on it. That is an Akamai portal. So like a lot of companies in this space now, we do not actually provision all of the services internally within our company. We outsource some of it. So Akamai does a lot of our DDoS screening for us, and we have a contract with them to ensure that they actually intercept our traffic, and if we suffer attack, they will either automatically scrub or develop a rule very quickly to scrub the traffic coming in. Okay. This is just a sample of what the people in the CSOC are actually looking at. These guys are, as I said, employed 24/7. What they look at is a single screen, so they sit there all day processing data through a workflow system. Now, the workflow system we use is Jira, and we get that the development done on that front for us through the ECS agreement that we have at the moment. So this particular one is a database access activity that they want to look at on an Oracle database, and it has been generated and passed to Jira by QRadar, one of the SIEM tools that we actually use. So the guys will open up one of these, and they will then process it. So they carry out some form of triage to decide whether or not this is a real incident or not. They will then escalate, usually through the business pathway first, but it will depend on what the actual event is. And if necessary, if we deem it as a true incident, then they will raise an incident in another part of Jira workflow system, and that workflow will then pass to the incident management team that I mentioned earlier, who will then process it. Okay, so a little bit about our physical setup. So what we do, so the current CSOC key functions are security monitoring for insider threat. I did mention that is probably one of the biggest things that we encounter at the moment. Now, part of that, I think, is because we've developed these rules which are actually capable of detecting it. So this has always been going on. It's just something that we've suddenly gained visibility of. So it's not necessarily something to be alarmed about because you were exposed to that risk anyway. It's just that you know about it at the moment. We also look for network attack monitoring, and this can be anything from people scanning our systems, also looking for vulnerabilities to get into, in fact, the entire DDoS attack scenario that we've mentioned. Rogue device detection is an interesting one. You'd think that it was common sense that most people would know that if you come into a Lloyds Banking Group office, you don't plug your own computer into our network. But in fact, because we have a lot of third-party agreements, not necessarily just in IT security, but with a lot of our business areas, we find that we get a lot of consultants coming in thinking, oh, I'll just plug this in and connect to the internet using your network. So obviously that's not available to them. We do provide services like wireless in every installation to allow consultants to log on securely to their own internet or intranet services. But rogue device is interesting for us because we do also have instances where some of our branches have little rooms in them where a customer can come in and consult with a branch staff member, but can also access the internet from there. And we have found that sometimes that these people actually connect their own devices as well, thinking that it's okay to connect out from there. So quite an interesting one. Cyber threat monitoring. So this is basically an intelligence function whereby they constantly look at various portals looking for information about evolving threats, and also we participate in like SC magazine and so forth to make sure that they send us any intelligence as well, and various others. I mentioned SOX compliance monitoring. That was almost 100% of our work a few years ago, and now constitutes about 10%. We're doing far less of that than we have done in the past, and indeed is our strategy to move away from that and move purely into threat detection. Security log retrieval is a service we offer. So if we have an instance where, for example, Group Security and Fraud, which is another department in Lloyds Banking Group, wishes to actually look at what was actually going on with a particular individual at a certain time, then we will retrieve the logs to allow them to do that. And that's only if those logs are stored in the SIEM tools. The engineering key functions, use case development. So we do develop on a use case basis. We have developed our own methodology to do that, and we employ that internally. You carry out rule configuration. So any of you operating in this space, first time you implement a rule, you're going to get a lot of false positives on that front. So generally speaking, we put a rule into a warranty period the first time we install it, and it will remain in that warranty period for 2 weeks. In that time, it is reporting. It's not firing alerts into Jira. It is just telling us how many incidents of this type we would find, and the guys then configure that down to a manageable level. Toolset enhancement and development, new releases come along, new capability is available within the tools, so they're responsible for developing that. They also get involved in perimeter defense analysis. So I mentioned the threat and vulnerability team, which is another part of cybersecurity. So they work with them to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what our perimeter is and what defenses are in place and what our vulnerabilities are. Threat intelligence, I think there's various agencies we employ to provide that for us, and they're responsible for processing that information as it comes in. Forensic analysis, if we do have an incident, we can seize the hardware concerned and we can analyze that. Now, the last time I gave this talk here, we were actually just in the process of developing that capability. That capability has now been deployed, and we have a forensics lab based here in Edinburgh, where all forensic analysis for IT purposes is actually carried out. So that's another growing area in CSOC. Okay, computer security incident management, CSIM. There is a responsibility to actually govern our response whenever there is an actual incident going on. So if an incident is triggered, we have a war room put aside within our Edinburgh data centre, where we can actually all gather, link up with video links with various parts of the company and indeed some of our third-party suppliers to manage the incident as it's happening. And the guys are actually responsible for making sure that we follow all due process when we're actually running that incident. They are not responsible necessarily for the remediation that can be deployed out to any of the other groups in cybersecurity. One thing that we develop a lot of is playbooks in CSOC. Now, the CSOC itself, the 24/7 service, has something like 95 different playbooks. This is to help them deal with all of the different event types that they are likely to encounter. Now, that is where most of the work is done. Some of the work that is coming into CSIM, we discovered that actually we now need to probably deploy that there. And this is primarily because we're expecting to see high staff turnover in the next few years, and we want to make sure that knowledge transfer to new staff is something that can happen easily and efficiently. Okay, I mentioned group security and fraud. That's what GS&F stands for. They are primarily responsible for investigating any fraud that takes place on our infrastructure. Within cybersecurity, we're really only interested in IT security events, not anything that is fraudulently related. But they often have a need to engage us to help with their investigations so that we can actually trace how a fraud has actually occurred for them. And lastly, we did mention the insider threat. So we have now had to set up a specialist team in HR, the colleague conduct team, who are actually dealing with all of the instances that we are actually finding of our colleagues breaching our acceptable use policy of the internet. So that will give you some idea of the frequency of the incidents we're encountering. Okay, the data loss prevention team is quite a large team, as I mentioned, so it does all of the above, but primarily in the data loss space. Now, why is that separate? Because it's a separate tool set. So we have elected to use the semantic enforce utility, and we're currently exploiting the functionality of that at the moment. DLP is interesting because it has another function, and that is education of colleagues. So when we do encounter a data loss incident, the first thing we want to do is establish is this malicious? Is this person leaving the company and about to take some important information with them? In that case, if it's non-malicious, then we will educate the person on what they should actually be doing to send out data of that nature. So they may not be aware of the encryption tools available to them to allow them to send that data securely. Okay, I'm getting the 10-minute marker, so I'm going to start rushing a bit here. I have mentioned most of the tool sets that we have used. QRadar is an IBM tool. We use that for privileged user monitoring. So we monitor the use of privileged user IDs. Every checkout is monitored and has to have a valid change control associated with it. High-risk detection, high-risk activity detection. So if we see someone, for example, elevating their privileges, and we don't think they should have the capability of doing that, then that would be a high-risk activity, and we would investigate that. Rogue device we've covered. LANCOPE is a Cisco tool, and that is part of our network monitoring tool set. Rare events. Okay, like a lot of banks, we have had to take part in the CBEST initiative. We actually passed that first time. Now, the interesting thing about that one was that the events they generated were very low level, very slow, and they only took out a small amount of, or attempted to take out a small amount of data at a time. We didn't always we didn't always prevent the data going out, but we did always detect any activity from that team. Compliance monitoring is SOX, as we've discussed before. On the DLP side, in the semantic tool set, we're looking for certain banned file types, so we don't like exes attached to emails. Lexical's interesting, we've got less of an appetite for that. Banking can be a bit po-faced, so they don't like people using colourful language. So some of that is alerting on that front. Some of it obviously picks up other things. Images is another thing. You've no idea the number of baby photographs that come into our organization. And because our image processing is tuned to pick up a high level of flesh tones for other reasons, we actually highlight in them quite a lot. But the important thing we're looking for is banking details and national insurance numbers, passport references, all that kind of thing. And we really want to detect any spam and phishing that's coming in, and that's part of the DLP functionality as well. Splunk is a much more flexible tool than QRadar, so we use it a lot more than we anticipated initially. And for a lot of the things that are in fact listed there. But the important thing I want to draw out about Splunk is that the contextual event enrichment is actually something that adds a great deal of value to the monitoring process, because we can use output from Whois, Active Directory, geolocation, all that kind of thing to further analyze an event automatically. And the message that we were sending out with this one is once you lose control of your data, you lose control of your business. Because if we lose data, for example, like banking details, our reputation would rightly be in the toilet. And I think it's not moving forward. Jamie. I think this might be my last slide. A minute, it's down there. Yeah. Okay, so just quickly, what's coming next? Pick out what's really, I think I will not address the content of this slide, really, because I think the one big thing that is coming next for us is big data. It's going to be huge for us. We're finding that the more things we detect through monitoring and advise our senior managers, actually we've done this, the more they want us to do, and we need the capability of Hortonworks and others to help us do that. So we're currently in the middle of a huge project to deploy that in LBG. We're facing a lot of issues, as you might imagine, not least of which is controlling access to the tool set. Because all of the sort of cyber nerds that we have working in various parts of our company, obviously this is the new sexy thing. They all want to get access to it, work on it, and use it as a sandbox to find out what the capability is. So we're having issues around that front, which we're currently addressing and hope to address in the next few weeks and get that service actually deployed. And that's the other issue that we face with this, is putting service wrapper around big data. What services are we going to offer out there? How is that going to change the content of my presentation the next time I come to deliver it? Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank Stevie for coming and sharing all those operational insights about how you kind of make the Security Operations Centre work. That what we do slide just kind of encapsulates the size of it, you know, and the scope of this. I know Ben's got a question, and then I'll open it up to the floor.
So you spoke about forensic seizure and analysis. How do you do that in relation to the third-party contractors that you have in any BYOD type scenario?
Currently, we don't do any seizure BYOD because we can't legally do that, but we are addressing that with our legal department at the moment. We do supply third-party contractors with our own hardware, and that will be seized more aggressively than if it was an LBG employee. Okay.
Anyone else? Up back there?
Do you run any external audits or anything across your systems such that any evidence that you get and presented is developable?
Audit is the bane of my life. I am constantly audited. Within the team that I mentioned, the strategy, transformation, and integration and governance, the governance part of that, I have created a team of 3 people just to coordinate the amount of audit we are actually under. So we're externally audited by PwC and KPMG and the likes under various drivers, and we're also internally audited. So we have a function called control testing within cybersecurity, where we actually have defined what our key controls are, and once a year we test them to make sure that they are actually robust enough to meet the requirement.
Do you find that a lot of cybersecurity issues have an offline aspect to them, such as, I don't know, in branch grooming of branch staff or things like that? Or do you find that it's primarily online?
The evidence we find is the online evidence because we're technically focused, but when it moves into the incident management process and we're engaging with the teams I mentioned there, the colleague conduct teams and so forth, that's when we encounter that. I'm not, thankfully, responsible for dealing with that because it's a particularly hard thing to do, because there are some very sad cases that we've encountered where people have been manipulated within our organisation.
In the front here.
As part of your intelligence work, do you go out and investigate breaches or data that might have got out of your organisation and find it when it's sitting on either the open or dark web?
Generally, we're alerted by various agencies to that effect, where they've found data, and it's kind of commission basis that if they find it, we might, and it is critical data, then we might pay them for it, basically. But generally, it's reaction to it rather than us going out and actively seeking it.
I'm going to indulge one last question for myself. Why did you move to Edinburgh?
It's cheaper to employ people here. We're bankers, guys, come on.
The pool of talent.
Yes, a pool of talent. Yeah.
Some great questions there, actually. Thank you.